Last year, I made a review of the early Cartoon Network series Cow and Chicken. The show usually comprises of 3 segments, 2 about Cow and Chicken, followed by one unrelated segment called I Am Weasel. Since this segment was eventually spun off into its own series, I decided to hold off on it for its own dedicated review. That was a very bad idea. I Am Weasel is fine, I don't hate it. That isn't the problem with giving it its own review. The problem is that it's stylistically incredibly similar to its parent series, and as its own package, it's incredibly short. It has a total of 79 segments, or just over 26 half hours to call its own. I want each of my own videos to have a unique feeling or statement, and that's been hard to come up with here. But I should give it a fair shot. It's a cartoon I watched through, enjoyed plenty about, and I have promised I would cover, so sorry about the wait for this one in particular is what I'm getting at. The genesis of I Am Weasel came out of the approval of Cow and Chicken as a full series, with Hanna-Barbera asking show creator, David Feiss, to put an extra segment or 2 in his show. It was customary for the very early cartoons to have secondary segments, because it was customary for Hanna-Barbera cartoons in general. Dexter's Lab had Dial M for Monkey and the Justice Friends, and Johnny Bravo had Jungle Boy once. The idea Feiss chose was this little sketch of a weasel, named after one of his favorite sci-fi books as a kid, I Am Legend. But this was a weasel who would play against type, being brave and heroic. James Earl Jones was considered for the voice, before Feiss was then recommended Michael Dorn by Johnny Bravo creator Van Partible. Another significant contributor to this segment was fellow Spumco alum Richard Purcell, former Ren and Stimpy guy, future SpongeBob guy, he's in that crowd. There were plenty of Spumco people on I Am Weasel, but Purcell was probably the second most significant in shaping the tone and dynamics of it. It premiered alongside Cow and Chicken on July 15th, 1997, and like its parent show, was successful. Successful enough to be spun off into its own show on June 10th, 1999? Maybe not. It was such an afterthought in the rapidly expanding cartoon lineup that we don't have records for many of these air dates. Even cartoons from the 50s, I can find some air dates with sources. There didn't seem to be anyone keeping track of I Am Weasel during its brief time as a standalone series. End dates vary from September 1999 to September 2001. Oh gosh, I didn't know. I would hazard an educated guess that it finished airing before Cartoon Friday's second season kicked off in June 2000, but you never know. What you should know is how I feel about the show. Like I said before, it's alright. Can't pretend to hide it.
Oh, that weasel think he's so big. First he on Mars, he first on Jupiter, first on Uranus?
The show stars an intelligent and successful mammal named I Am Weasel. He's beloved by everyone except a couple people in Afghanistan and one baboon, who may not be smart, but at least has the decency to clothe himself. This I.R. baboon is always out there seeking validation, causing mischief and making the world a little dumber. So I Am Weasel has to stop him, for he is Weasel. That's at least the setup for the early episodes. Later ones would rework their dynamic into a buddy comedy, where the smart guy and the dumb guy are given equal responsibility in solving a problem and the success rate is unpredictable. But as for who they are as individuals, Weasel is a likable enough protagonist. What I mean is, you're probably not going to love him to pieces, but he's a standard hero type, almost Superman in how standard an example he is. They give him some flaws as the show goes on. He can get pretentious and has less tolerance for the buffoonery going on in his world, so you can tell they were looking for ways to keep him central to the show. Baboon is a complete idiot. The idea is to make him as dumb and reckless as possible. If you prepare yourself for his antics, you aren't watching the character properly. There are those times where you feel bad for him, that he can never be treated entirely seriously by his peers or the show, and that keeps him somewhat human. All that's left of the original cast is all the beautiful women who hang around Weasel in the early episodes, and all the bosses he has in the more job-heavy adventures. They're as bland and stock as they come, with very few memorable features or embellishments to their roles. I guess that's why, starting in Season 2, they let the red guy take over as the villain of these segments as well. Same character, same role, same huge rounded front and center array of disguises. Still one of the most entertaining things about the show, so this is nothing but a positive. Cow and Chicken's teacher sneaks in sometimes too, and so do Flem and Earl. Cow and Chicken and the appearance less so. In fact, this eventually became an excuse to just give Cow and Chicken an extra segment for the side characters to screw around in. Whether that's a good or bad thing is up to you, and if it were up to me, I'd say this is a good thing. The addition of an unrelated segment was an executive decision, as I went over, so Feist, Purcell & Co. just used it to do what they wanted once the show became a success, and what they wanted to do was make more Cow and Chicken, but not to throw the weasel out with the baboon water. That idiom makes no sense. Here's a joke that makes no sense.
The meaning of life is a number, and that number is 1. Yay!
I have to give this sort of lowbrow tomfoolery some credit. This is a show with commentary compared to something like Ren and Stimpy. That show just used the smart-stupid dichotomy for jokes, but I Am Weasel wanted to make more of a fuss out of it in the story department. If Cow and Chicken is about siblings and childhood relationships, I Am Weasel sits you next to your annoying co-worker. It's the slightly more adult of the two shows, going into territories ranging from menial labor to scientific study. Well, in elementary school understanding, as it's revealed later that Weasel never graduated 4th grade, which explains a lot about this world if he's one of the smartest people in it. So it's overall pretty manic and silly despite this commentary, which is pretty surface level anyway. There's always something loud and crazy around the corner. They pack a lot in 7 minutes. The MRA says I'm having a good time, but their headache says otherwise. There's a conflict of interest going on. This sort of over-the-top, gag-driven cartoon is one of my favorite genres, but you have to be in a good mood for them when they're this extreme with it. The animation plays a part in that. I could just copy and paste the animation section of my Cow and Chicken review, but to reiterate, it looks good, fluid, and stays creator-driven, which is impressive for a Hanna-Barbera cartoon, even a later one. The character designs of Weasel and Baboon are each iconic in their own right, so it's just fun to see them interact with a myriad of settings.
All the trees in Oregon, you say?
Yes. Do you take cash, Mr. Oregon?
Of course. Please call me Eugene.
This branch of the overall Cow and Chicken show was still getting started in season 1. No pilot to give them an idea of what to do, just a mammal, a primate, and a lot of creative freedom. It's the most unique season of I Am Weasel with its visuals and quirks. Easiest way to tell you're watching one is with the title cards, with Weasel introducing the episode with varying degrees of approval. It's fun, but I have no idea if this is the producer's way of saying, watch out, we're not proud of this one. No matter what I say in the rankings later in the video, they deserve to be proud or dismissive of as many episodes as they want. Despite this unique quirk, this is probably the most normal set of episodes. It liked its little formula of Weasel having a job and Baboon being a villain. Towards the end, they started to flesh Baboon out a bit more, make us feel bad for him, which preps you for the change in focus the following year.
Let's see how our concoctions are doing today.
This is where the show pivots into probably its most recognized setup, that being Weasel and Baboon being an unwilling comedy duo. The stories are just more dynamic this way, when you can count on them both being in the same place with similar tasks a lot of the time. As mentioned earlier, this is where the Cow and Chicken cast starts to trickle in, which keeps this segment from straying too far from its parent show. And besides the red guy, you never know who's gonna show up and how, so that's one thing that stays unpredictable. Weasel's allowed to make mistakes, the cast is allowed to get bigger, and there's no way of making sense of it. The segment is less of its own thing, but conversely has hit its stride.
Why on earth are you dancing with your livestock?
We is too shy to talk to girls.
There. Women are often quite frightening.
I'll use the Season 3 section to spotlight another staff member, Maxwell Adams. Joining in this run and storyboarding the majority, his episodes are among the most acclaimed by staff and fans. As you're likely to know, he'd later create Grim and Evil and its spin-offs, and you can draw a line between the wild, unhinged style of those shows and Cow and Chicken and I Am Weasel. I think the 3rd season is the strongest for Weasel. Some fresh talent and fresh ideas are always what a show like this needs.
What are you doing?
Why are holding hands?
Baboon is my friend.
Wrong!
Their fourth run is nearly as good as the third, but there are moments where it starts to get a bit smug, and this is the last show that should be acting smug. They do this whole sequence in I Am Cliched to say Tiny Toons shouldn't have used so many iconic jokes from better cartoons. They then go and do the conjoined twins joke from The Simpsons not long after. To be fair, this episode is self-deprecating too, about how bizarre their plotlines are. Weasel ends it by saying he might prefer the more tried and tested style of humour, so this is friendlier fire than it looks. The Rugrats and Angry Beavers jabs are also not something I can pump my fists to. You're fun, guys, but you're not stump fun. Season 5 of I Am Weasel is pretty much Season 1 of I Am Weasel. Okay, to avoid confusion, the first 4 seasons are the I Am Weasel segments from the 4 seasons of Cow and Chicken. Their single season as a full-blown spin-off is often labelled Season 5 to avoid confusion, but this is just more of Season 4 in terms of humour and story construction. Still not as consistent as 3, but more developed than the first 2. But ironically, it's developed into less of its own thing, so there was less of a reason to sell it as its own spin-off because now it's just more Cow and Chicken but without Cow and Chicken. It was a good thing when it was part of that show, less so when they have to fend for themselves in the schedule. It's still more mindless gags and zany plotlines, so when they try to make grander statements, there are mixed results. I Am Cave Weasel ends with this kind of nihilistic reflection on how the future will bring around a society that's more or less a dead end for itself, and it's like, I don't want to be blackpilled by a saber-toothed weasel. One grand statement episode that's a little more optimistic is the finale, I.R. Legend, which circles all the way back around to the I Am Legend influence, but the reason no one's around is that they're all sitting inside watching the show. So Weasel ends the show by giving a speech telling you to touch grass. It's a great parody with a fitting ending to one of the most deliberately mind-numbing TV shows of its time, and was just shy of my top 5, which I shall get to now. The whole is pretty simplistic and pretty high concept. Here's a whole. Have fun, guys. They somehow have fun. I hope the magnificent motor bikini is fanservice-y enough for you. If not, there's always more further up the list. The practicality of a wearable vehicle is tested here, and the animators and artists made it look more cool than Fever Dream. I Am Vampire gets you in the Halloween spirit, maybe a bit late, by making our heroes vampires, but they don't like steak. Hardy ha. It works in a show like this where the more normal jokes are a breath of fresh air. I.R. Pixie Fairy is about magic beings that live in your sponge, and Weasel is playing the part of something that can stop them. He's now everyone's favourite parasite. This probably shows how much of a sucker I am for sped up voices, but that's the main reason I remember this one and find it so amusing.
If I am re-elected, I promise you more wetness than ever before. We are liking wetness! Wetness!
The best episode, however, is Who Rubbed Out Cow and Chicken, a crossover with themselves. Okay, not much of a crossover, but it's a fun little mystery romp where their universe has seen in a strange new way, a worthy finale to their time on Cow and Chicken. Because there aren't many episodes, there aren't many super egregious duds, so I'll keep the worst list just as short. Ping Pong at Sea is an especially disjointed plot. They're having a ping pong match on a battleship. Very Mad Libs kind of plot setup, and the episode hinges more on that than anything else. I.R. Gentleman's seems like a slam dunk, My Fair Lady with Baboon, but it's clear they were still fine-tuning the tone because this goes just a little beyond my threshold for chaotic nonsense. That's the point, but there are much smarter episodes after this. Desert Island has a cute candy world beneath its old-fashioned island native tropes. I don't like saying, boy, that doesn't align with the sensibilities of I or the average Cartoon Network enthusiast in recent times, but there's no accounting for everyone's media literacy. The Sorcerer's a Dentist is the formula of Baboon taking over Weasel's job and screwing it up taken to its most random setting. Dentists in medieval times where he makes a princess's tooth big and hairy. It reminds me there were many funnier applications of this formula done earlier by this point. The worst episode of all is Power of Odor. Baboon starts a pig farm and makes the world smell almost as bad as LA. Like the bathroom episode of Cow and Chicken, it just feels like one juvenile joke stretched out ad nauseum and isn't worth watching more than once, even if you're really into this kind of humour. And that's all I've got on I Am Weasel. Between these two segments, I'd say I like Cow and Chicken more, but it has the advantage of the more relatable setup and more episodes. This sister segment is fine and got some chuckles out of me, but struggled a bit to stand on its own. It'll be in that camp of not one of my favourite cartoons, but I'll put it on once in a blue moon, when I'm up for the especially unhinged kind of cartoon, but one with a faint semblance of reason. This show was never afraid to show what it wanted, ergo it was never cowardly, and thus saved the reputation of the Weasel.
Well, I guess it's dummies 1, smart guys 0.